Brilliant. Good. Let's get started then. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning on our Quantum Let's Get Phygital webinar. We expect this to last no more than 45 minutes, and within that time we've allowed some time at the end to answer any questions. So if you have got any questions along the way, pop them into the chat and we'll get through as many as possible at the end. And just to note that we're going to record the webinar so we can share it with you all afterwards, and you can pass it on to colleagues if you would like to. So what are we doing today? Well, this is definitely a webinar, and it is definitely not a sales pitch. So throughout the deck, we've used some examples to bring our thinking to life. A couple of them are our work, but mostly they are just work we admire that bring the Phygital concept to life really beautifully for us. So hopefully you'll find them all interesting, and that they'll stimulate some new thinking for you regarding your own brands when you go away and think about those. Who are Quantum? Well, for anyone not familiar with us, we're an agency on the south coast of England, and we exist and we love creating memorable and motivating experiences for both brands and consumers. And really all of these experiences have the ultimate goal of selling products. And selling products for many of us is a challenge that's become a whole lot tougher over the past couple of months. So what are we talking about today, and what is Phygital? Well, really we're here to talk about the difference between physical and digital events, and they're sitting in very separate silos at the moment. And there is often some element of integration, but there are really very few examples where digital and physical experiences are fused so neatly and used to their full potential in an integrated way that they deliver really lovely, tailored, personal and memorable experiences for consumers. So we're here today to explore how far you can push that technology in delivering something really, really unique and really differentiated. So just in terms of who you'll hear from today, I'm Debbie. I'm the Managing Director and the founder of Quantum. You also hear from Jodie, who's a planner, Andy's a business director, and Daz, who's a marketing manager. So a bit of variety and lots of different voices. And I'll just pass you over to Jodie, who's going to kick off.
Great stuff. Thank you. Morning, everyone. So I suppose in terms of the first point, as marketeers, any new marketing term that joins sort of our lexicon of various descriptive terms, we always seem to find great ways to make simple terms mean more than one thing. So we always like to start with a bit of a definition, just to be absolutely clear about what we're talking about. And we use this, which basically is from the Future Laboratory, but Phygital combines the physical and digital worlds for an experience that is full of immediacy, immersion, and interaction. So in terms of where that really sort of came from, Phygital is a phrase that sort of focuses on making the whole worth more than some of the parts, and good Phygital activation takes the best bits of each channel and makes something that's ultimately a much more complete and satisfying experience. It originated very much in the retail space through, to be honest, a bit of a backlash from a kind of a very much a digital focused culture that wanted everything as convenient as possible and sort of rejecting traditional bricks and mortar. That sort of reversed a little bit as people sort of said, well, actually, we want more than this. We want the best of both worlds, and actually started rejecting that kind of the gap in that context to really have the, I suppose, the immediacy of an interactivity of the convenience of the digital experience, but with the immediacy of physical stores and the ability to sort of experience things in real world and touch and feel products. Now, obviously, as developing technologies and supply chains and attitudes have evolved, digital experiences are providing a really new way to kind of connect with consumers and audiences in exciting, sort of immersive, immediate and personalised ways, more so than ever before. So, whilst that's a good place to start, it's always interesting to sort of lift the hood a little bit and look at what are the forces that are really sort of driving this change. So Fundamentally, it all comes down to experience, and this won't come as new news, but we know that to many consumers, 78% of consumers say that experiences are more important than things. So why is that? Why has this evolved? It's a terminology we're all very familiar with, but what we're trying to do here is just get a bit more sort of understanding of what's driving that. And we tend to look at 5 key factors that drive any kind of major change and trend in the market. So first and foremost, obviously, technological advancements are the main driver, or one of the key drivers behind this. Phygital is only possible because of the development of immersive and interactive technologies. But what's really important about that is that it's more than just the development of these technologies. You'll presumably, a lot of you will be familiar with sort of adoption curves, but when we start to see new technologies appearing in the market, what's really critical is when they reach that tipping point, when they are mainstream, and that's when digital technologies really sort of come to life. Secondly, there's a kind of a big shift financially, and that kind of stems back to sort of generational differences in the way society has evolved. So when the baby boomer generation grew up, they had pretty much a realistic chance, if it was something they wanted, to have a job for life. They'd leave school, college, or whatever, start a job, and if they kind of worked hard and stayed consistent, then there would pretty much be a degree of security for them. That then changed for our Gen Xers when job security kind of evolved and went out the window a little bit. But security meant being able to build a nest egg or buy a house and sort of invest in those status symbols of physical things. As things progressed, that became far less attainable for our Gen Y and now Gen Z, who needed new ways to measure their social growth and achievement and invest more in themselves as a way of developing that sort of security. But what's interesting is Gen Z is taking this even one step further, which is beyond the kind of experience economy of just having experience for experience's sake. It's now more important to talk about the quality and depth and immersion of the experience, and also critically who they're sharing that experience with. And that's where phygital experiences really come into their own. As a third point, sort of from a political perspective, I think it's probably fair to say in every generation there's a degree of mistrust in markets around political systems and authorities, but that's never been more prevalent and heightened as it is at the moment, largely due to the transparency and culpability. What issues go online stay online, and everyone is held far more accountable for their histories and what's gone on in the past. Equally, this means that they're looking for new sources for their inspiration and look more towards sort of trusted sources, influencers that they know and follow, or their friends and immediate family, that they can really trust and get their information from. And equally, it makes it much more shareable in terms of passing on that information. And in fairness, the lack of trust and has led to a search for truth, and that's probably one of the more defining traits of Generation Y and Z. So in terms of other factors, social obviously is playing a massive role in this. From a social perspective, consumers now care less about what a brand delivers in terms of products and services, and much more about what it stands for. And obviously, as sort of conscious consumerism really comes to the fore, the experience that a brand creates is far more important than ever before. And finally, it wouldn't be a webinar without mentioning the COVID word. So just to sort of touch on that, as with any kind of seismic event, you'll find a lot of changes have been forced in the market. So that's really driven a heightened amount of switching from physical to digital. So as an example, where people were perhaps a little bit reluctant to use video conferencing in the past, it's now pretty much part of the mainstream. And I'm sure we all have Zoom, WhatsApp and House Party and all those other platforms that we're all using day to day just to stay in touch. And we don't see that any more clearly amplified than in the share price of Zoom, which has rocketed from $70 per share to in January to 150 recently, and with over 2.2 million users in 2020, which is more than the whole of new user acquisition in 2019. So that's the theory. And that's all great, but what we really like to do is make the approach to give you a really kind of clear way of putting this into practice. So we've developed an approach to merging physical and digital. So as an initial step point, the main thing we have to change is the way we think. Debbie alluded to this earlier in her introduction, that we're still thinking of these as different channels, and maybe that's part of the reason why we're still seeing quite a disjoint or a disconnect in the way that these are running. You know, our digital departments and experiential departments tend to be different people, and they tend to sit under different workflows and things. So the fact that we're thinking of these as two different work streams is indeed sort of part of the issue. So we need to move away from thinking about them as separate streams, but just how we create these sort of integrated journeys. So how do we do that? Well, we have 3 steps that we follow in order to make sure that we're keeping all of our activations as good as they can be, and really engaging and immersing. So we talk about starting and considering your audience and what they're into. We then no experience is really complete without having a solid narrative, and then there are some essential components to Phygital that we really focus on and use as a kind of a checking a checkbox to make sure that we're communicating properly. So step 1, this is, I think this is probably a nice generic point across all marketing, but really more so in Phygital than any other. It really does begin with the needs of your audience, and as with any kind of communication development, empathy is really the difference between good and great, and how well we can deeply get to know and understand and contact our audience defines pretty much exactly how well your experience is going to engage with them and how successful your activation is going to be. So as digital technologies have developed, we can now get far more interesting learnings using sort of AI software and using sort of cluster technologies to really understand in a more intelligent and more in-depth way what's important to our consumers. So this is kind of beyond the pen portraits that we used to sit in workshops and concoct, which probably had a very loose sort of understanding but related to no one, to being really specific about what our audience are doing, when they're doing it, where they're doing it, and how we can connect with a specific tribe and get a far more deeper understanding of their behaviours. And fundamentally, as a sort of constant touchstone to everything that we do, we always think it's important to have a really clear understanding of what the behaviours are that you're trying to influence and change, and even the barriers that you're trying to overcome. So what can we learn with these new tools, and what sort of depth can we get? So we can understand their values, we can see in real time what they really understand about, what they really care about, what they really believe in, their behaviours, what are they actually doing? Again, in sort of focus groups before, I'm sure we're familiar with consumers giving us sort of answers that they think they want people to hear rather than the actual truth. We can also see where they're hanging out and who are their connections, and finally, critically, where they're getting their information from, who they listen to, what are their sources. So this first example is a great sort of example of people really understanding their audience. Now, not every brand has the kudos and awareness of Levi's, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy. In their market, it's pretty much defined by consumers flipping across trends, and the big challenge really is earning and keeping relevance. So getting to know their tribes, what's hot, what's not, who they listen to, is absolutely critical to the success of any campaign. So when they launched their iconic trucker jacket to mark the 50th anniversary in Dubai, they developed a strategy that was started by us and finished by you, which is totally driven by the cultural diversity of the region. It obviously merged physical and digital worlds in store with touchscreen technology to add interest and things like that, but they wanted to really attract and keep a younger edgier audience. So they wanted to find out who it was that they were associating with, what were their influences. And they developed a platform to support those influencers and artists to showcase their work in front of the region's top press. So great example of caring enough about your audience to really do that digging and understand what they care about.
So step 2 is about building a Phygital experience narrative. And there's a whole separate webinar needed to go into the art of storytelling, but of course we're all familiar with why brand storytelling is so important, and that's to engage and make it a sticky, memorable and relevant experience for consumers. Plus, of course, with nearly 7 million years of humans using stories to pass on information, who are we to argue? It's the old adage that people will often forget what you say, but they don't forget how you make them feel. So how do we make them the hero? How do we trigger the need to be immersed? What are the emotional triggers that stimulate the tension? And how do we create not just reactions, but actions too? And to be able to do this Phygitally, first we need to look at the areas that complement digital and physical, and then map out where they overlap. And we need to mark the points in the journey where you can use media to enhance the experience. And it's not just thinking about how we create shareable moments, it's thinking far, far beyond that, and thinking about how we can make the experience more tailored and more personal to the individual's likes, needs and wants, because that technology is available to us all now and everybody wants tailored personal experiences, and there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be stretching our experiential to be tailored and individual. And once we do that, we're in a position to create a really seamless, really integrated, really personal digital journey. And the next example we've got is one I really love. It's Paradiso Secreto at Casa Corona in Mexico City. And what this was a full virtual sensory scenic wilderness that allowed consumers to chase the sunset through different rooms with the ultimate goal of reaching the beach in time to reach the sunset for the main party. The activation was housed in the Casa Corona feature, and it had multiple themed rooms, location-based VR experiences. The multisensory journey featured physical touch points, sensorial experiences like temperature, scent, wind, all those sorts of things. And it was brought together virtually to bring a slice of paradise to the heart of Mexico City and create the ultimate party. So it really is an amazing case study. 3,500 influencers participated over 6 nights. And what they managed to deliver were 887 million social media impressions. So a really good example of how this unique Phygital experience, which was targeted at a fairly decent quantity of influencers, but the reach, because they did it so brilliantly, the reach was so wide that it delivered far, far and above the physical experience.
Great. So I'm now going to talk you through the third and final step of our process. And effectively, this is our toolkit, if you like, in terms of how we can deliver digital experience for our brands and making sure it can be the very best it can be. And I think what's really important as we go through this toolkit is thinking about the various different channels and contexts it can be applied. So think about how this toolkit can help our experiential activity or out-of-home experiences, but also think how it might change the retail environment through shopper marketing, our on-trade presence with our bartenders and our consumers, and also in consumers' homes as well. And it's a really simple process. We've sort of distilled it down to the 3 I's. So we've got immediacy, interaction, and immersion. And actually, when we can create an experience, a Phygital experience, where all of these conditions are met, we can make consumers feel much more trusting of a brand, much more empathetic, and ultimately be more connected with us than ever before. And what we're really seeing at the moment is that with ever-changing technology developments, there are solutions and platforms out there and ways of delivering things where you can really hit these 3 I's successfully. So let's go through each of the I's in more detail. So the first one is immediacy, and we've got a really interesting insight here, which is that about half of people agree that they are looking for new experiences and sensations that will liven up their everyday lives. And the really interesting point here is how we can engage with consumers through Phygital in their everyday life moments. So the big question for brand owners is, how can we interact with our consumers in their everyday lives? And immediacy is about connecting with consumers at the very right moment and delivering this engaging with them instantly for maximum effectiveness. So we need to make sure that we're talking to our consumers at the right time, and that will suit both our consumer but also our brand, because if we're talking to people at the right moment and delivering a relevant message for that moment, then we're going to get better interaction. And no other medium can be more flexible or as personal as digital. You know, it's one of the greatest things about digital technology. You know, and think of it as simple as sending a message directly to a consumer's smartphone or through social. And brands should consider how we use things like contextual messaging. So for example, the time of day, the geolocation, all of these different metrics to make sure that we increase or optimize the total Phygital experience. And remember, the role of digital in this immediacy stage, it's about seamlessly leading consumers to the physical experience. So digital is that way of making contact with our consumers at the right times in that very immediate fashion, and then driving them to a physical moment or a physical experience with our brand. And a really good example of this is actually a campaign that we ran for Hendrick called Cucumber Currency. And the brief here was really about how we drive physical liquid to lip sampling in the on-trade. And that's a really big challenge to do at scale. But actually what we did is we developed a digital sampling mechanic that used Facebook chatbot as its technology to drive consumers to a physical product trial in bars. So how did we do this? What we first did was establish a network of outlets. So liaising with our local bars and pubs, making sure that we've got a really good network of outlets that want to give away free Hendricks and tonics in their outlets. We then created digital and physical POS to promote the offer both outside of the venue and in the venue. So we're already using communication strategies in the digital and physical space. Then we launched our chatbot, and what was great about the chatbot was that we were able to serve messages to consumers, remember, in that kind of immediate fashion, depending on their geolocation. So when consumers were within a couple of kilometers of a participating outlet, they would be able to engage with the chatbot and we'd be able to take them straight there. The other great thing about chatbots is that you can use very intelligent software to make sure the messaging is always contextual. So always making sure that the communication is both immediate, but is also relevant to the consumer's everyday life experience. This obviously linked digitally consumers into a physical venue where they had that liquid to lips experience. And what was great, we had 300 participating outlets and about 3,500 redemptions. So a really good example about how Phygital experiences can make sure we drive trial at scale. The second I is interaction. And here we're saying that physical reality is replete with interesting kinesthetic experiences, which may be repurposed to create engaging hybrid or Phygital experiences. And really the big question for brand owners when it comes to interaction is, how can we integrate physical activities into our Phygital experiences? So really, what we would challenge you guys to do is think of interaction as the tangible, so tangible assets that we can use in our Phygital experiences. Because what's great about physical assets is it really helps to create lasting memories with our consumers. And evidence shows that kinesthetic engagement helps to consolidate our relationship with brands and products, leading to stronger memories and greater affiliation with the brand. So really the trick here is to design and implement brand activations that force our consumers to interact with us. So really not relying on digital as a silo technology, but complementing it with physical interaction. And the next case study we've got here is actually a really current example. It's a project we're working on right at this moment. And it's for one of our clients. They're a leading personal healthcare company. And as with most brand owners, I'm sure most of you at the moment are thinking about things like brand planning or buyer meetings or range review meetings. And because of COVID-19, we're having to think very differently about how we facilitate those meetings. And it would be all too easy to either cancel the meetings or just go to a default Zoom meeting or digital conference. But actually, what we've learned in these last few weeks, we actually challenged ourselves and said, no, we're going to go beyond just the standard digital call, and we're going to do a really good Phygital experience. And what this is doing for our clients is it's really setting them apart from their competitors, because this approach and this behavior demonstrates that we're a real challenger brand, a real innovator. So absolutely, this case study is working for us now because of the political context, but we would challenge all brand owners to think how you can continue to deliver these digital experiences in the years to come. So how did this particular example work? So what we're delivering is a virtual escape room experience. So the way the whole process starts is that our buyers will be receiving a Perspex invite box with a unique code that they need to use to unlock it. Now, the way they have to unlock it is by calling their account manager to request the code. So we're already kind of facilitating that one-on-one engagement that we really value with our buyers. Inside the box is a virtual reality headset. And this will have a 5 to 10 minute virtual reality experience that takes our buyers into our brand world, which is really important in the way of storytelling and telling our story of our master brand in a virtual way. Then in 5 days' time, they'll be participating in a virtual escape room experience with us, which will be hosted via a Zoom link, but will involve tangible assets to deliver that interaction as part of our second eye. So how does that work? So in the acrylic box we send them, there's actually going to be 4 different boxes containing clues that are associated with the 4 different rooms they'll be going through. Now, they'll need to use these physical props and items in order to unlock the messages and the clues to go into the next space. So, we're never always reliant on digital or physical. Brand owners must ensure the two work together to drive interaction. And then the third and final I is immersion. And here, with consumers inundated by visuals, we are starting to see brands explore the use of sonic and haptic technologies to shift the senses and engage consumers in new sensorial ways. A sonic being amazing sound experience, and haptic thinking about 3D virtual touch. So the big question here for brand owners is, how can we use these immersive technologies to deliver out of this world experiences? And so digital technologies, they really give us the ability to kind of push boundaries to facilitate these different experiences. And, we can think of things like augmented reality and virtual reality, but they really give us an opportunity to take consumers, customers, different people into different environments to create meaningful connections. And with 5G on the scene, augmented reality and VR is really skyrocketing. So we anticipate this being a really emerging trend. And there's nothing to stop brand owners from using this technology in different contexts. So think about how we might take our consumers to our brand heartland. Can we transport them to where our brand was first created? Or could we take our customers on virtual immersion trips rather than sticking them on planes and flying them around the world? Could we use it to educate retailers and bartenders on how to deliver the perfect brand encounter with our consumers? Or could it be used to deliver some retailtainment in store? And that's something that the big malt grocers are really looking for brands to be delivering. And of course, how can we bring the brand world to our own consumers' homes? And a really fantastic example of this is Audi's HoloRide platform, which is actually a partnership between Audi and Universal Pictures to showcase the world's first in-car virtual reality experience. And what's really insightful about this is that they're basically challenging people to stop thinking, are we nearly there yet, when you're on a passenger journey, but thinking, do we really have to stop now because I'm just having the best time? And so working with Disney's, they're creating virtual experiences that correspond to the car's real-time movement. So really clever. So passengers will wear the headset, they immerse themselves in a virtual space, and then HoloRide will actually take the data from the car. So, for example, the route that the car is taking, the steering angle, and even the acceleration, and that will dictate the real-time experience in the virtual environment. So, for example, if the car accelerates quickly to 60 miles an hour and takes a sharp corner, the passenger's virtual environment accelerates and takes that turn as well. So a really interesting way of how you're integrating a digital world with a physical experience. So there you have it. There's the 3 different I's. And what we're saying to you guys as brand owners is, use this as your toolbox in delivering effective digital experiences.
Thanks, Andy. So just to wrap up, don't forget the time is right for Phygital. Embrace it and get ahead of the curve. This was always going to happen, but I think COVID has just given it a bump. It's made everyone ready for the integration and the digital embracing of technology much quicker. So it's accelerated it, but it was going to happen anyway. So the new normal is now. Consumers are ready and embrace the technology. And that wraps up our presentation for today. So I'm going to hand over to Daz, who's going to run the Q&A just to answer any questions that have come through as we've been chatting.
Cool, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, as Debbie said, if anyone does have any questions, following those slides, please do pop them in the chat box for us. I do have a couple though, off the back of what you guys said. So first up is that, given that physical events have come to a complete standstill, the past few months, what do you guys think will happen to physical events generally when the world returns to normal?
I can take that one. So, I mean, it's a tough question to start with, but I think, there are two really clear trains of thought. One is that, the whole world is going to change. And the other is that people are going to be so keen to get back to the things that they were doing before COVID that they're going to embrace them. And I tend to feel like the latter will happen, although it's going to take some time. But I think, what we can take away and what we're saying with Phygital is that you can take away the technology that everyone has been embracing over the last few months and will continue to do so until we're out the other end of it. And you can do that to deliver even bigger, better experiences for them because, make no mistake, there's going to be a proliferation of events and experiences, when we can all get back to normal, and we're going to be competing even harder on an already fairly cluttered landscape. So anything that we can do as brands to make things different and more integrated and more personalized, the better.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Debbie. It kind of, I guess that leads on nicely to the next one as well, which is around, are these Phygital events that clearly they look like a lot of work, from some amazing case studies there. I guess understanding whether they're able to be turned around, quickly and especially reactively, given what's happened around the world the last couple of months as well.
Yeah, I'll take that one because we're literally doing that right now. I think it's a good question. Actually, digital means that we can work a lot quicker. So I think by way of an example, the virtual escape room that I took you through earlier, we had to be very reactive in that context because we went from physical to Phygital literally overnight. But what it demonstrated to us as a team and also to the brand team that we're working with is that it's very simple to turn this stuff on super quickly. And digital technology enables you to be exceptionally quick at creating separate work streams to deliver a total experience, basically. So I would actually challenge that, Daz, and say that Phygital can actually accelerate the way that you're developing and optimizing those kind of those Phygital experiences with your consumers.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Andy. Okay, so we've just got two more quick ones. So I guess there's a lot of brand owners out there on the call, who might not necessarily adopted Phygital yet. It's a relatively new concept for some businesses. For those people, how do they convince their teams that Phygital needs to be a part of their plans moving forwards?
I'll take that, Daz. I think quite simply, it's like with any new technology, what works this year in our marketing plans doesn't necessarily work next year. And I think, as Debbie says, the time is now, because if you don't do it, quite simply, your competitors will be. If we think about digital advertising, which was, a new concept less than a decade ago and now has more revenue than any other form of media, I think we need to be more open to trying these new things. Yes, not everything will work every time, and there will be, some learnings along the way. But absolutely, unless we kind of push ourselves, not just as brands, but as an industry, then we need to be there to be delivering these experiences for our consumers, and that's what they're sort of expecting. So I think it's a question of really need to be open to adopting and copying. And not just copying and pasting in marketing plans and trying new things, because there's only two directions that you go.
Yeah, Okay, cool. Thanks, Jodie. We got one last question. I'm just going to ask, which is from John, who's asked, what trends do you see forming with respect to this technology? So obviously, we've talked about kind of VR, AR, out of world experiences. I guess where do we see that going in the future?
I can make a quick start on that one, Daz. John, I think it's a really interesting one, and as part of that kind of third eye, we spoke about immersion, and I think I highlighted in the voiceover that 5G is really driving and accelerating movement into more accessible immersive technology. So that's absolutely going to be growing, and it looks as though virtual reality and augmented reality have been around for a number of years now. But actually the forecast is looking that augmented reality is going to be the technology that's really going to improve, and that brands will adopt that, because rather than taking individual consumers or users into a very silo world like virtual reality, augmented reality gives more, I guess, tangible ways of brands interacting with their audience, whether it be furniture placement with IKEA, or Dulux have launched one where you can look at what your room might look like in a different shade of colour. And when we talk about retailtainment and things like that, that's all going to continue accelerating. So my bet would be on augmented reality, but we'll have to wait and see.
Cool, thank you, Andy. Cool. Well, I think that's covers about it. So yeah, guys, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your questions. Just so you all know, I'm going to follow up and send out a link to the presentation and the video of the webinar today. So obviously feel free to share that with any of your colleagues. I'll pop a link in there to our diaries too, just in case anyone wants to take the conversation a bit further, get some ideas from us and see how we might be able to help you and your brand specifically. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.